Welcome to the Lesson Plan, everyone. That is our working title for a new podcast where I will take a deep dive into how DPS is using better curriculum and better instruction to improve academic outcomes. I'm your host, Nicole Brady, and my guest today is Dr. Simone Wright, our Chief of Academics. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Wright.
Thank you for having me.
And we can't wait to get to a really high-level overview with you today, because the goal of this podcast and every episode is to explain to our DPS community, our families, our students, really the process that they don't see every day in the classrooms. Because I know as a parent myself, I will see the CMAS scores come out, or we see graduation rates, and maybe they improve a little bit, which is great news. But we want to talk about the work that's being done, the very intentional work in the classroom every day that's getting us to move that needle. And so I want to let our listeners know that before you became who you are today, you started your educational journey as a classroom teacher, a science teacher, is that right?
Yeah.
So you saw it on the ground.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, take us back to those early years. What was that like?
You know, when I think about what drives me in this role, it is my experience as a first-year teacher. I would say my experience is very interesting. I'm not a traditionally trained educator. I have a chemistry degree, and I got the opportunity to teach high school science in Southwest Houston, specifically chemistry. So I knew the chemistry. I did not know the pedagogy. I did not have any sort of like mental model, resource, or support to ensure that my preparation to teach the chemistry would actually engage my students.
That is so interesting, because it takes that good teacher, not just the knowledge of the material.
Yeah.
And so much goes into how we teach, and that's a great segue, because that's exactly what we're going to be talking about throughout this podcast. So I want to talk about the why. Why is DPS using the curriculum it is currently using, the instructional framework, and the high quality instructional materials it's using? A lot of this goes back to the pandemic 5 years ago, is that right?
I would agree with all of those things. But if you were to ask me, why did we choose to start with high quality instructional materials? It is because it was the thing that everyone was talking about when I got to Denver Public Schools. The community was talking about the quality of the curricular resources. Our school leaders, our teachers, our educators were all talking about the quality of the curricular resources. Our students were advocating for better curricular resources. And so something I take with me as a leader, a nugget that one of my mentors shared with me, is that you have to build strategy around the thing that people are interested in. And so there was this opportunity to orient around this very concrete thing that most people honestly didn't really understand what it should look like. Why should we focus on it? Everyone just knew that curriculum was either going to be the derailer or the thing that added value to the teacher's capacity to facilitate good learning every single day.
Nice. And I just want to ask too, were the current performances of different schools part of the why as well? I mean, you want to raise those scores, is that correct? Yeah.
You know, my team coming, you know, when they knew this was the thing, like they knew this was the thing I like really cared about and the community cared about, and that I was thinking about orienting us around it. We did some initial analysis, and we actually worked with an external consultant to do the analysis. And the thing that consultant said to me was, Simone, your team is not positioned to support your schools because of the variance in both quality and quantity of curricular resources.
Interesting.
It almost made you question, like, what's the function of academics if there's so many different things happening at each schools? And, you know, the obvious sort of like, aha, or now what, is it was showing up in disparities. Like, and when I think about your child or someone else's child, it was left up to chance of what that school leader chose to do in terms of curricular resources. When I think about whether your kiddo might have been engaged every single day or not.
Wow. Very interesting. And I want to get back to some of those points when we talk a little bit about the flexibilities and the variances we will still see in schools. But first, let's go back to the term you used that everyone was so excited about, high quality instructional materials, HQIM.
Yes.
This is a term that's in
Yes.
education that most of us out there would have no idea what it is. What is an HQIM?
Yeah, so I do want to acknowledge every large system is talking about high quality instructional materials, and every system is thinking about it differently. And I would name that part of the reason we've been able to make the gains, both in alignment around our instructional priorities and starting to see gains in student achievement, is because we actually spent the time to define what does high quality instructional materials mean for the Denver public schools. We went through what I like to call a user-centered design process. We talked to a lot of different folks to get clear on, okay, like high quality instructional materials, like what exactly are we talking about, right? And I would distill it down to 3 different things for Denver public schools. We are chasing student coherence. Like what a kiddo experiences in language arts in 3rd grade, they need to walk into 4th grade feeling like they've acquired the foundational knowledge and skills to make sense of 4th grade. And a strong curricular resource or high quality instructional materials supports our teachers with making that true for our students. The other 2 things worth naming for us when we think about high quality instructional materials in Denver public schools is equipping our educators with what they need to facilitate culturally and linguistically sustaining learning experiences. And to be a little less edge-speak, a little less jargony, it is important that when you walk into a classroom, that each student is engaged, irregardless of culture, race, language, ability. Like we do believe a good resource equips a teacher with being able to facilitate that learning every single day. And then here's the other really, really big thing that I think gets lost in the HQIM or the high quality instructional materials conversation. If it is too hard for a teacher to use, it won't get used. And so we were really, really clear that when we think about high quality instructional materials in Denver, educators need to say yes. There's a usability factor, right? And the design of the curricular resource impacts whether educators choose to learn how to use the resource or not. I do want to name, we see high quality instructional materials as a way to address teacher knowledge and skill so that students experience grade level or higher instruction, and they are able to benefit from what we know to be true as evidence as effective practice for students to learn every single day.
You talked about teachers buying into this plan. And are we getting good buy-in? How do you get a teacher to want to use the materials that you've put so much work into vetting?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you got to bring them to the table. And I'm not saying that every single teacher has been able to engage in our adoption process, but I would say it's been a multifaceted approach. I think it started with designing our vision and our rubric to support all curriculum adoption moving forward. And I think where that has helped bring organizational coherence and alignment is we're all sort of clear around our intent around high quality instructional materials and what needs to be true both around the actual resource, but what's needed for educators to be developed and trained and receive ongoing professional learning to be able to utilize the resource with some level of integrity and in a way that benefits their students every single day. But also, as we're going through our adoption process, it's pretty lengthy. Because we do create space for educators across the system and, when possible, students to be able to engage in that experience so that they can articulate, like, how does this help me and what are the flags, right? So I think both aligning with our key constituents, honestly, around the bigger picture and then each individual curriculum adoption has helped us to be able, I would say it has helped us to be able to get folks bought in. Like we're not, and I will offer, we do get feedback on the other side as well. So where things need to be revised, shifted, changed to support the most, I would say, integral interaction in our system, which is between the teacher and the student. Like we are consistently designing our system to account for that feedback and make those revisions.
That's great to know that teachers have a chance to take this material, use it, and tell you if they think it's working. So there is something called the flexibilities process in this, and schools are allowed to opt out of some of these materials. Can you explain that process and then what happens with those schools?
Yeah, so I do want to acknowledge we're chasing scaling quality learning across Denver. And I just want to also name, as the Chief Academic Officer, every curriculum has its flaws. And so for us, the flexibility process is not designed to ensure we get all educators to say yes to the same curriculum, but it is designed to support our vision and rubric around high quality instructional materials and ensure that each school has the systems in place to support utilization of the curricular resource to bridge teacher knowledge and skill in advancement of student engagement.
Nice.
And so the bigger picture here is we use the vision and the rubric to allow educators or principals who want to opt out. We use that to ensure that the curriculum that they are choosing still meets the bar we've all agreed to, and that the school is conditioned to provide the professional learning and the coaching and the support to their teachers so that kids are learning across Denver, and it's not left up to chance whether our students will be successful based on individualized school context.
Yeah, great. And if you start to see a school that's using these resources and things are working, that's perhaps a chance to go back to those other schools and maybe help them understand it better. Is it an ongoing process, I guess?
So I would say a couple of things, right? It is an ongoing process. It's a process that our schools engage with every time we have a new curriculum. And I think what I've seen over the last couple of years is when leaders transition, a school that may have historically chosen to use a different curriculum than what the district is endorsing, a lot of times a new leader may choose to opt back in. And I will name, I don't think it's about the curriculum. I think it may be around sort of like collective school capacity to support something outside of where the district may be able to lean in a little bit more and address capacity.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how are we tracking this? Through assessments of students. Students are regularly assessed, not just in those standardized tests, but regularly, both formally and informally, by their teachers. How are we starting to see that these processes are working already?
So I do want to acknowledge, there's a lot, once again, there are a lot of conversations around this curriculum versus that curriculum. And the bottom line for us is our kids learning. And, I think we can definitely talk about summative assessments and state summative assessments, district summative assessments, school-based formative assessments. But for me, when I walk in a classroom and I see every student doing the learning, like literally doing the learning, it's an indicator to me that we're moving in the right direction. And so I would offer, it is about going to schools that may either historically have been underperforming and seeing what kids are doing. That is where I personally feel like, okay, like we're moving in the right direction. And like, obviously we want to be able to measure student learning as well, right? I think there's a teacher like satisfaction aspect of this. And it's not necessarily about teachers liking the curriculum. It's about teachers articulating how is the resource helping to increase the effectiveness of their teacher practice as well.
Great. Actually, when it comes to assessments, we often have to wait for that data sometimes to come out. We don't want to have to. A teacher, I'm sure, doesn't want to wait before taking some corrective actions. Do they have the flexibility to do that within these frameworks?
Yeah, so something I didn't explicitly call out, but our third sort of bucket around what is HQIM in Denver Public Schools is around design. And we believe a good curricular resource includes a lot of different opportunities to both formally and informally assess whether students are learning.
Nice.
And I would offer that our educators are equipped to take what they know to be true about their students on an informal interaction and utilize what it is that happened that day in class and make the pivots and the shifts to be able to ensure like they don't have to wait till CMAS comes out at the end of the year to know whether their kids were successful. Yep. Like we do see the conversation around high quality instructional materials as a way to demystify assessment and know whether our kids are progressing in a way that sets them up to be successful when they leave Denver Public Schools.
Great. You've been in this current role for about 2 years now. How do you feel about where this is? And you can go back to, in terms of how much buy-in the district's been getting and the schools have been giving. What you're seeing, as you pointed out, when you walk into those classrooms, how are we doing?
Yeah, I will acknowledge, if you are familiar with Strength Finders, Achiever has always been in my top 5. It is not anymore, but that's a separate conversation, different podcast. I don't know that I'm ever fully satisfied, and I'm not fully satisfied because I do actually believe all of our students come to us with the potential to perform at grade level and or higher. And I do feel it is our responsibility to ensure the system is designed to maximize on student potential through learning every single day. I also do want to acknowledge that I feel very proud of our school-based educators and our principals. I feel very proud of our central office colleagues because they have really gotten behind this vision and this work and showed up together in service to our students and our families so that Denver is trending in the right direction when we think about measuring like student achievement and whether kids are learning. And it's worth just naming, I may have some perfectionist tendencies. And while I think we've done great work and we've come a long way, I still think there's a lot of work to do.
Yeah, always. And through this podcast, we're going to be explaining more of that work to our community, as I mentioned. So I want to take this opportunity to let people know we're going to bring in the experts in literacy and what we know is and math and work-based learning and career and gifted and so many things that the district has its hands in. And so I'm really excited to dive in with those experts, as I know you are as well during this program. What do you think they'll be able to provide to the listeners here? When we hear about the science of reading, that's a new concept out there right now that I think is going to deserve a lot of attention on this show. And these are the examples of what you're talking about. This is what parents might hear about that their kids are doing in schools.
Here's what I would want to say to all of our families in our community. The way in which you learned how to read and the way in which you learned how to do math was not actually, it didn't actually support any of us with truly being critical thinkers. And it didn't really equip us to utilize our assets every day as learners. And The only thing constant is change. But I do think as a larger education ecosystem, we've gotten clearer about what needs to be true when we walk into classrooms, what teachers actually need to do so that kids can learn.
Yeah.
And I think both our executive director of teaching and learning and our director of humanities are going to be able to speak to that shift in a very clear way. And it's going to illuminate the jargon that is culturally and linguistically sustaining. At the core of that is, how do you utilize student assets to support learning? Most of us went to school and our teachers assumed we didn't know anything and they needed to tell us. And I would name what we now know to be true about math, literacy, science, is that's factually inaccurate.
Wow.
And they're going to really tease that out for you.
Yeah, that is so interesting. You have to, that comes back to so much of what you pointed out about the cultural backgrounds of different students. A student who can speak more than one language already is approaching this from a different perspective than the teacher, perhaps, who only knows the words in one language. I just as an example, and so that student knows more in some respects than that teacher because of that. I love that they'll be able to talk a little bit about how different it is from when you and I were growing up, because I know parents get scared. They hear new math, whatever, years ago, and there's an outrage. But really, so much of this is evidence-backed and very intentional in what's going on.
I would say that we are better positioned to bridge our values as a district with what the research says around what needs to be true for students to learn. And I think, instead of like showing up and telling people what need to happen, I think we've been strategic and intentional around building coalition around our instructional priorities, scaling the evidence base. And now I think we are more so than ever working and moving in the same direction, because the thing we actually care about is that each student learns and that they leave our system equipped with the confidence and skills to write their success narrative.
Wonderful. What well said. And providing opportunities to all of these students. I do want to ask how AI is poised to play a role in this, because I think it's very much like the internet was 30 years ago. It's going to change everything.
Yeah.
So how do you see it advancing the work you're doing? How is it already perhaps being used?
I want to acknowledge that there are several thousand teachers that have opted in to understand how AI can shift their practice so that students are engaged every day. That story is not being told. I personally believe that streamlining emergent technology or AI with HQIM or getting clear about those intersections, I think could change. I think it could save the educator workforce.
Wow.
I think the narrative around the hard things we're asking teachers to do and how much time it takes, I think we are uniquely positioned to bridge actual effectiveness and efficiency around teacher practice in a way that truly centers students. And I think that will impact the number of folks we get to say yes to be teachers. And I think, we always talk about how you need to do something for 5 or 7 years to be really good at it. I think that narrative could be shifted and it could be changed. And then I think it's just worth naming, like, half the battle of being a good educator is access to information about your kids. Wow. And I think the role that AI is like teasing and like could play in ensuring accurate information are at our educators' fingertips around our students, so they actually can make data-informed decisions more frequently. I think it will truly accelerate student achievement. But as with anything, there are a lot of people that we got to get on the same page. And I think some of this is creating space I think some of this is also creating space to do the process improvement. We have a partner that we've been working with for about 3 years, like literally in one school specific to middle school language arts. And this year will be the first year they're in 10 to 12 schools.
Oh, wow.
But that partner has leverage. Like, first of all, we trust that partner, but we've almost worked with them to design the product. And,
That's great.
you know, I think it's just worth naming some of the risks associated with AI. But when a partner is willing to, like, spend time in one school with our central office leaders, our principals, our teachers, to refine and ensure that their product supports the learning of our students who we care deeply about, then, you know, it's worth figuring out how to scale.
Well, thank you so much. As I said, we are going to continue this conversation. Next time we meet, actually, we're going to zero in on a district-wide shift in math instruction. And I really hope you'll stay with me on this journey to look deep into how DPS is making sure every learner thrives. We will see you next time.